Part 1: The Bridge of the Human Warship. Valkyrie was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, reviewing supply reports from the last station visit. His crew had been on patrol for 3 weeks now, cruising through empty space near the edge of human territory. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Lieutenant Amy Brooks was the first to notice something wrong. She sat up straight at her communication station, her eyes going wide. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming through on multiple frequencies." Jake set down his tablet and turned toward her. "Put it through." The speakers crackled to life. A voice came through, speaking in a language that the ship's computer quickly translated. The voice sounded desperate, filled with fear. "This is Viridian Prime. We are under attack. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. The Krell swarm has broken through our defenses. They are everywhere. Our cities are falling. We cannot stop them. Please help us." The message repeated several times, then went silent. The bridge crew looked at each other, uncertainty written on their faces. They all knew what the Krell swarm was. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew about the Krell. The Krell were like locusts, but a million times worse. They traveled through space in massive swarms, eating everything they found. They consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all life before moving on to the next target. 17 civilizations had been destroyed by the Krell in just 10 years. The creatures were nearly impossible to stop because there were always so many of them. "Where is Viridian Prime?" Jake asked, his voice calm but serious. Commander Paul Hayes checked his navigation console. "It's in the Viridian system, about 8 light years from our current position. The planet is home to the Torathi people. They're a peaceful species, mostly artists and traders. No real military to speak of." Amy pulled up information on her screen. "Captain, the Torathi made first contact with us about 3 months ago. They seemed nice enough. Very friendly, always talking about art and philosophy. They trade in handcrafted goods and exotic minerals." Jake stood up and walked to the main view screen. He stared out at the stars, his mind racing through options. The Torathi were not allies of humanity, not really. They had only met a few times, shared some meals, exchanged some trade goods. But they were living beings who needed help. "How long to reach them?" Jake asked. "At maximum speed, we could be there in 6 hours, Paul replied. "What about the Galactic Council? Shouldn't we report this to them?" Amy asked. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with her controls. Jake shook his head. "The Council takes days to make decisions. They'll argue about jurisdiction, about resources, about whether it's worth the risk. By the time they decide to help, everyone on that planet will be dead." He turned to face his crew. "Send an emergency signal to all other human ships in the area. Tell them what we're dealing with and give them our destination. Any ship that can reach Viridian Prime should come immediately. We're going to help these people." "Sir, are you sure?" Amy asked quietly. "The Krell are dangerous. Really dangerous. And there might be millions of them." Jake looked at her, his expression hard but not unkind. "Someone sent out a call for help. That means someone is still alive down there. Still fighting, still hoping that somebody will come. I'm not going to let them die just because it's dangerous." Set course for Viridian Prime. Maximum speed. Within minutes, the Valkyrie's engines roared to life, pushing the massive warship to its highest velocity. The ship shook slightly as it accelerated, but the dampeners kept the crew comfortable. All around the ship, systems came online. Weapons were armed, shields were raised, and every crew member moved to their battle stations. Jake returned to his command chair and opened a communication channel to engineering. "Chief, I need everything you've got. We're going into a fight." The chief engineer's voice came back, rough and confident. "You'll have it, Captain. These engines won't let you down." As the Valkyrie raced through space, responses started coming in from other human ships. The Warhammer under Captain Lisa Grant was 4 light years away and changing course immediately. The Iron Maiden was further out, but promised to arrive as soon as possible. The Liberty and the Ragnarok both confirmed they were coming. 5 ships. 5 human warships against a Krell swarm. It should have been suicide. Any other species would have called it madness. But humans had something that other species didn't quite understand. Humans came from Earth, a planet classified as a Class 12 death world. That meant it was one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Earth had predators that could kill with a single bite. It had diseases that could wipe out entire populations. It had weather that could destroy cities. It had earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and 100 other ways to kill the unwary. But humans had survived all of it. More than survived, they had conquered their world and reached for the stars. They had learned to be tough, to be stubborn, to never give up no matter how bad things got. When other species looked at a deadly situation and saw certain death, humans looked at it and saw a challenge. The 6 hours passed slowly. Jake spent the time reviewing everything they knew about the Krell. The creatures were insect-like, each one about the size of a large dog. They had hard shells that could stop most light weapons. They had sharp mandibles that could cut through metal. And they never stopped coming, never retreated, never showed fear. But the Krell had one major weakness. They were a hive mind. Millions of individual creatures controlled by a single intelligence. That intelligence was spread out among all of them, so killing a few wouldn't do much. But it also meant they couldn't adapt quickly. They used the same tactics over and over because that's what the hive mind told them to do. Humans, on the other hand, could adapt. Every human soldier could think for themselves, make their own decisions, come up with new strategies on the fly. In a battle against an enemy that never changed, that flexibility could be the key to victory. "We're approaching the Viridian system," Paul announced, dropping out of faster than light in 30 seconds. Jake gripped the arms of his chair. "All hands prepare for combat. This is not a drill. When we drop out, I want eyes on everything. Find me those Tarathi people and find me the swarm." The ship shuddered as it dropped back into normal space. The main view screen lit up with the sight of the Viridian system, and what Jake saw made his blood run cold. The planet below was covered in black. Not the black of night, but the black of billions of Krell swarming across the surface. 3 orbital stations that should have been shining in the starlight were instead broken ruins, torn apart and left to drift in pieces. The Krell had already won, or so they thought. "Get me that planetary governor," Jake said quietly. "Let's let them know the cavalry has arrived." Part 2, the view on the screen was worse than anything Jake had imagined. The planet Viridian Prime had once been beautiful, according to the database files. The Tarathi built elegant crystal towers that caught the sunlight and made their cities shine like jewels. Now those towers were broken stumps, and the cities were being devoured by a living tide of black creatures. Amy worked frantically at her station, trying to establish contact with the surface. "Captain, I'm picking up a weak signal from underground. It's coming from some kind of bunker system beneath the capital city." "Put them through," Jake ordered. The screen flickered and changed. A Tarathi appeared, and Jake had to stop himself from showing shock. The Tarathi were tall beings with crystalline skin that normally refracted light in beautiful patterns. This one looked like he had been through hell. His skin was cracked and dull, his eyes exhausted. But when he saw Jake, something like hope flickered in those eyes. "Human vessel," the Tarathi said, his voice weak. "I am Governor Thessian of Viridian Prime. I did not think anyone would answer our call. The Galactic Council told us we were too far from their protected zones. They said they could not spare ships to help us." He paused, looking like he might cry. "Are you here to evacuate the survivors?" Jake leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. "Governor Thessian, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. We're not here to evacuate. We're here to kill every single one of those things on your planet. How many of your people are still alive?" The governor's eyes went wide. It was an expression of pure shock that translated clearly across species. "Still alive?" "Captain, we have nearly 2 billion Tarathi sheltering in underground bunkers across the planet, but the Krell are digging down to reach them. We have perhaps 1 day, maybe 2, before they break through. Our weapons barely scratched them. Our military forces were wiped out in the first hours of the attack. What can you possibly do against so many?" "You'd be surprised what humans can do when we're angry," Jake said grimly. He turned to his crew. "Amy, I want a full tactical scan. Count every single Krell on that planet and in orbit. Paul, get me fleet positions. Where are our other ships?" The answers came back quickly. The sensor readout showed over 300 million Krell on the planet's surface, spread across every continent. Another 50 million were in orbit, forming clouds of creatures that drifted through space around the planet like a swarm of angry bees. The Tarathi defense satellites were all destroyed, their wreckage adding to the debris field. "The Warhammer and Ragnarok are entering the system now," Paul reported. "The Liberty will arrive in 20 minutes. The Iron Maiden is still an hour out." Jake nodded. "We'll start with what we have. Amy, open a channel to all human ships." When the channel opened, Jake spoke with absolute confidence. "All ships, this is Morrison. Here's the situation. We have roughly 350 million hostiles between us and 2 billion civilians. The civilians are underground and running out of time. We're going to split into 2 groups. Valkyrie, Liberty, and Iron Maiden will handle orbital bombardment and space superiority. Warhammer and Ragnarok will deploy ground forces and establish defensive positions around the shelter complexes. Questions? Captain Lisa Grant's voice came through from the Warhammer. She sounded eager, almost excited. No questions, Jake. My Marines have been sitting on their hands for months. They're ready for this. Good, Jake replied. Remember, the Krell are a hive mind. They don't feel fear, they don't retreat, and they don't negotiate. We need to hit them hard and keep hitting until there's nothing left. Morrison out. He closed the channel and looked at his tactical officer. Lieutenant Brooks, I want you to target those orbital swarm clouds. Use the railguns. I want them cleared from space in the next 10 minutes. Amy's fingers danced across her controls. Targeting solutions locked firing. The Valkyrie shuddered slightly as its main weapons fired. Railguns were one of humanity's favorite weapons in space. They used powerful magnets to accelerate chunks of metal to incredibly high speeds. When those chunks hit something, they released enormous amounts of energy. It was simple physics turned into a devastating weapon. The first salvo tore through an orbital swarm cloud like a knife through paper. Krell bodies vaporized instantly, unable to withstand the impact. The creatures didn't scatter or try to dodge. They just kept drifting in their formation, making them easy targets. Target the next cloud, Jake ordered. Keep firing until space is clear. While the Valkyrie and the other orbital ships worked on clearing the space around the planet, the Warhammer and Ragnarok descended into the atmosphere. Their hulls glowed red from friction as they pushed through the air, heading for the surface. On the Warhammer's deployment deck, Sergeant Kyle Peters checked his armor one last time. He was a big man, built like a linebacker with short dark hair and a face that had seen plenty of fights. Around him, 200 Marines were doing the same thing, making sure every seal was tight, every weapon was loaded, every system was green. Listen up, Kyle shouted over the noise of the ship. We've got 2 billion civilians down there depending on us. The Krell have numbers, but we have something better. We have training, we have weapons, and we have each other. Stick to your squads, watch your sectors, and remember your training. We're going to save this planet. The Marines responded with a loud cheer. They were scared, of course. Only an idiot wouldn't be scared facing hundreds of millions of alien monsters. But they were also ready. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission. Every one of them knew what they were signing up for. The deployment bays opened and the drop pods launched. Each pod was a simple metal cylinder designed to protect its occupants during a high-speed descent. They fell from the sky like meteors, trailing fire behind them. Kyle's pod hit the ground with tremendous force. Even with the dampeners and his armor, he felt like someone had punched him in the chest. But he was already moving, releasing his harness and grabbing his weapon. The pod doors blew outward with explosive charges, and Kyle stepped out onto the surface of Viridian Prime. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Even through his armor's air filters, he could detect something awful. It was the smell of decay, of death, of things that should not be. The second thing he noticed was the sound, a constant chittering, clicking noise that came from every direction, and then he saw them. The Krell swarm. They covered the ground like a living carpet, thousands of creatures all moving with purpose toward the Marine positions. Each Krell was about the size of a large dog with a hard black shell, 6 legs that ended in sharp points and mandibles that looked like they could bite through steel. Contact, Kyle shouted into his comm. Enemy in sight. Engaging. He raised his plasma rifle and fired. The weapon hummed as it generated a bolt of superheated matter and launched it at the nearest Krell. The bolt hit dead center, burning through the creature's shell and cooking it from the inside. The Krell dropped, but 3 more took its place. All around Kyle, his squad opened fire. 200 Marines against hundreds of millions of enemies. It should have been hopeless. But the Marines had brought the right tools for the job. Plasma rifles cut through Krell like they were made of paper. Grenade launchers sent explosive rounds into the thickest clusters, each blast taking out dozens of creatures. Heavy machine guns rattled constantly, spitting out thousands of rounds per minute, and the Krell kept coming. They climbed over the bodies of their fallen, never slowing, never stopping. They were like water flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance, seeking any gap in the human defenses. Tighten the perimeter, Kyle ordered. Don't let them get behind us. A Krell managed to break through the line and launched itself at Kyle. He brought up his rifle and fired point blank, the blast catching the creature in midair. It fell at his feet, smoking and twitching. "They're fast," Corporal Nina Ross said from his left. She was a smaller woman but deadly accurate with her weapon. "But they're not smart. They just charge straight at us." "That's the hive mind," Kyle replied, firing again and again. "They can't adapt. They're following a program, doing what they've always done. That's going to be their downfall." High above, Governor Thessian watched the battle from his underground bunker. His staff had patched into the human communication channels and they were monitoring everything. The Tarathi couldn't believe what they were seeing. "They're winning," one of Thessian's advisors whispered. "How is that possible?" "We had weapons too. We had trained soldiers. But the Krell swept through us in hours." Thessian stared at the tactical display, watching the small blue dots that represented human Marines holding their ground against the massive red mass that represented the swarm. "They fight differently than we do," he said quietly. "We tried to defend. We tried to hold our positions and wait for the Krell to stop. But the Krell never stop. The humans understand that. They're not defending. They're attacking." And it was true. The humans had not established defensive positions to hide behind. They had created killing zones, areas where the Krell had to approach through concentrated fire. Every angle was covered, every approach was targeted. The Marines fought with a ruthless efficiency that the peaceful Tarathi had never imagined possible. "Captain Morrison," Thessian spoke into his comm. Part 3 Kyle had been fighting for 2 hours straight, and his armor's ammunition counter showed he was down to 60%. Around him, the ground was covered with dead Krell. Their bodies were piled so high in some places that the newer waves had to climb over the corpses to reach the human lines. But the swarm kept coming. For every Krell that fell, 10 more appeared to take its place. Kyle's muscles ached. His throat was dry and sweat poured down his face inside his helmet. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. "Kyle, we've got a problem on the east perimeter," Nina called out. "They're starting to flank us. There's too many of them." Kyle switched his view to the tactical map that appeared on his helmet display. Nina was right. The Krell were starting to flow around the sides of their position, like water finding a way around a rock. If they got behind the Marines, they could cut them off from the ships. "All squads shift formation," Kyle ordered. "Charlie and Delta squads fall back 50 meters and establish a secondary line. We're going to create a funnel and force them to come at us from a narrower angle." The Marines moved with practiced precision. Even while firing, they managed to reposition themselves exactly where they needed to be. Within minutes, the new formation was set. The Krell that had been trying to flank now found themselves caught between 2 lines of fire. High above the planet, Jake watched the ground battle on his tactical display while dealing with his own problems. The orbital space was mostly clear now, but a new swarm cloud was emerging from the planet's atmosphere, rising up to attack the human ships. "Incoming hostiles," Amy reported. "Looks like they're trying to swarm us directly." "Let them come," Jake said calmly. "Activate the hull defenses." The Valkyrie's outer hull was covered in a network of high-voltage electrical panels. It was a defense system that humans had developed specifically for dealing with boarding attempts. When creatures like the Krell tried to latch onto the hull and chew their way inside, they were in for a nasty surprise. The Krell reached the ship and began attaching themselves to the metal surface. Their mandibles started cutting into the armor, making slow progress. Then Amy pressed a button on her console. Electricity arced across the entire hull of the ship, jumping from panel to panel. Every Krell that was touching the Valkyrie was instantly electrocuted. Their bodies went rigid, smoke rising from their shells, and then they drifted away into space, dead and frozen. "Hull defense effective," Amy reported with satisfaction. "0 penetration. All hostiles eliminated." "Good work," Jake said. "Now target any remaining swarm clouds in orbit. I want space completely clear before the next phase." The Liberty and Iron Maiden had joined the fight now, their weapons adding to the barrage. The 3 human ships worked together like a well-oiled machine, each one covering a different sector of orbital space. Within another hour, not a single living Krell remained in orbit around Viridian Prime. But the planet's surface was a different story. The ground battle was intensifying. The Krell had figured out that the human positions were strong, so the hive mind was sending more and more creatures to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. "Captain Grant," Jake called to the Warhammer. "What's the situation down there?" Lisa's voice came back, and Jake could hear weapons fire in the background. We're holding, but just barely. The Krell keep coming in waves. My Marines are running through ammunition faster than expected. We need support. Jake turned to Paul. Can we use orbital bombardment without hitting our own people? Paul studied his console, running calculations. It's risky, sir. The Krell are very close to our Marine positions. One missed shot could kill dozens of our people. But it's possible. Yes, sir. If we're very careful. Jake made his decision. Amy, target the largest Krell concentrations that are at least 200 meters away from our forces. Use precision strikes only. Small yield plasma torpedoes. I want to thin out their numbers without endangering our people. Targeting now, Amy replied, her fingers flying over her controls. The Valkyrie's torpedo tubes opened, and sleek missiles launched toward the planet below. Each one was guided by its own targeting computer, making tiny adjustments as it fell through the atmosphere. The torpedoes found their targets with perfect accuracy. Explosions bloomed across the planet's surface, each one vaporizing thousands of Krell. The shock waves threw even more creatures into the air. For a moment, the pressure on the Marine positions eased. Kyle saw the explosions in the distance and felt a wave of relief. Command, this is ground team. Good shooting. That bought us some breathing room. Don't get comfortable, Sergeant, Jake replied. We're going to keep up the bombardment. But I need you to do something for me. The Krell are starting to dig down toward the civilian shelters. We need boots on the ground in those tunnels to stop them. Kyle felt his stomach drop. Fighting the Krell on the surface was bad enough. Fighting them underground in tight tunnels where they had the advantage was going to be a nightmare, but those tunnels led to the shelters where 2 billion Tarathi civilians were hiding. Children, families, innocent people who had done nothing wrong. Understood, Captain, Kyle said. I'll take a squad down. How do we find the tunnels? The Tarathi are sending you coordinates now, Jake replied. There's an access point about 200 meters south of your position. Governor Thessian is going to guide you through the tunnel system. Kyle looked at his squad. They were tired. Their armor was scorched and dented, and they had been fighting nonstop for hours. But when he told them about the new mission, not a single one of them hesitated. Nina, you're with me, Kyle said. We're going underground. The rest of you hold this position. Keep the pressure on the surface swarm. Kyle and 10 other Marines broke away from the main group and headed for the tunnel entrance. They found it exactly where the coordinates indicated, a large opening in the ground that led down into darkness. Emergency lights still functioned along the walls, casting a dim red glow. Switch to night vision, Kyle ordered as they descended. And watch your spacing. In these tunnels, we can't have everyone bunched up. The tunnel system was extensive, carved out of solid rock by Tarathi engineers over many years. The passages were tall enough for the crystalline aliens but felt cramped for the humans in their bulky armor. The air was stale and smelled of fear. Governor Thessian's voice came through on their comm system. Sergeant Peters, can you hear me? I'm tracking your position. The nearest Krell incursion is 300 meters ahead of you, tunnel section 12. They've been digging for 6 hours and are getting close to shelter complex 3. How many civilians in that shelter? Kyle asked. 50,000. Mostly families with young children. They're our most vulnerable people. Kyle felt anger burn in his chest. The Krell were going after the weakest targets first, following some instinct programmed into their hive mind. We're not going to let that happen. Guide us in. The Marines moved through the tunnels as quickly as they dared. The further they went, the more they could hear the sound of the Krell. It was that same chittering, clicking noise, but now it was amplified by the tunnel walls, echoing all around them. Then they rounded a corner and saw them. The tunnel ahead was packed with Krell, so many that they filled the passage from wall to wall, floor to ceiling. They were digging at a reinforced door that led to the shelter, their mandibles scraping away at the metal bit by bit. Contact, Kyle said quietly into his comm, then louder to his squad. Light them up. The tunnel became a storm of fire and death. Plasma bolts filled the narrow space, each one killing multiple Krell. The creatures at the back of the swarm turned to face this new threat, but there was nowhere for them to go. They were packed too tightly to maneuver. Kyle had brought special weapons for exactly this kind of fight. Incendiary shotguns loaded with white phosphorus shells. The chemical burned at incredibly high temperatures and couldn't be put out easily. Each shell that hit created a ball of fire that consumed everything around it. The Krell began to burn. The smell was horrible even through the armor's filters. But the Marines didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Behind that door were 50,000 innocent people counting on them. "Keep firing," Kyle shouted over the roar of weapons. "Don't let any of them reach that door." The tunnel became an inferno. The heat was so intense that Kyle's armor started warning him about temperature levels. But the Krell were dying by the hundreds, their bodies creating a barrier that the ones behind couldn't cross. And still they came. The hive mind didn't understand tactics, didn't understand when to retreat. It only understood forward, only understood attack. So the Krell kept pushing into the flames, kept dying in that tunnel, because that's what the hive mind told them to do. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the pressure eased. The tunnel ahead was choked with bodies and no new Krell were coming through. "Cease fire," Kyle ordered. "Nina, check for survivors. Make sure none of them are playing dead." Nina moved forward carefully, checking each body with her scanner. "All dead, Sarge. We got them all." Kyle turned to face the shelter door. He could see it was damaged, scratched, and dented from the Krell's attempts to break through. But it had held. He pressed his comm button. "Governor Thessian, this is Sergeant Peters. Shelter Complex 3 is secure. The door is damaged but intact. Your people are." Part 4 of the battle for Viridian Prime continued through the night and into the next day. The Krell swarm never stopped, never slowed, but neither did the humans. Every time a Marine ran low on ammunition, a supply drone dropped fresh supplies. Every time a position was threatened, orbital bombardment cleared the way. And every time the Krell tried to dig down to the civilian shelters, Kyle and his tunnel teams were there to stop them. Jake watched it all from the bridge of the Valkyrie, coordinating the entire operation. He had not slept in 24 hours. His eyes were red. His voice was hoarse from giving orders, but he refused to rest while his people were fighting below. "Captain, you need to take a break," Amy said quietly. "Let Commander Hayes take over for a few hours." "I'm fine," Jake replied, though he knew it was a lie. But how could he sleep when men and women were dying under his command? When civilians were cowering in dark shelters, praying that the monsters wouldn't find them? Paul looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm detecting something strange. The Krell movement patterns are changing. They're pulling back from some of our positions." That got Jake's attention. "Pulling back? The Krell don't retreat. That's not how their hive mind works." "I know, sir. But look at this." Paul put the tactical map on the main screen. It showed the Krell distribution across the planet, and sure enough, several large groups were moving away from the human positions. "Where are they going?" Jake asked. Amy ran a quick analysis. "It looks like they're converging on a single point. The main Tarathi capital city, the one right above where Governor Thessian is sheltering." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They're going for the biggest population center. The hive mind must have figured out where the most food is located. He opened a channel to the ground forces. "All units, the Krell are massing for a major attack on the capital. Kyle, get your people out of the tunnels. You're going to need every gun up top." Kyle was already exhausted, his armor splattered with Krell remains and his muscles screaming in protest. But when the order came through, he didn't hesitate. "Copy that, Captain. We're on our way up." The Marines emerged from the tunnels to find the situation had changed dramatically. What had been scattered groups of Krell was now a solid mass of creatures all moving in the same direction. It was like watching a black river flow across the landscape. "How many?" Nina asked, her voice tight with stress. Kyle checked his scanner and almost couldn't believe the number. "Looks like every Krell on the planet is heading this way. We're talking about 200 million plus." "That's insane," one of the other Marines said. "We can't fight that many." "We don't have a choice," Kyle replied. "Behind us are 2 billion people who can't fight, can't run, and can't defend themselves. We're all they have. So we're going to stand here and we're going to fight until either they're all dead or we are. Everyone understand?" The Marines formed a line. 200 soldiers against 200 million monsters. The math was simple and terrifying. Each Marine would have to kill 1 million Krell just to break even. It was impossible. But humans had built their entire civilization on doing impossible things. "Captain Morrison," Kyle said into his comm, "we're in position. But I'm not going to lie to you." "This looks bad, I know," Jake replied. "But I've got a plan. We're going to use the orbital bombardment to thin them out before they reach you. And we're deploying every weapon we have. Paul, launch all the combat drones. Amy, I want continuous fire on that swarm. Everything we've got." The human ships in orbit opened fire with everything they had. Plasma torpedoes rained down from the sky, each one killing thousands of Krell. Railgun slugs hit with the force of small meteors, vaporizing entire sections of the swarm. Combat drones swooped low over the surface, dropping cluster bombs that scattered explosive submunitions across wide areas. The Krell died in unimaginable numbers. The bombardment was so intense that it created a wall of fire between the swarm and the Marine positions. But still they came, walking through the flames, climbing over mountains of their own dead, driven by the hive mind's single directive to consume. Governor Thessian watched from his bunker, and for the first time since the invasion began, he felt something other than despair. He felt awe. The humans were fighting like demons, like forces of nature given physical form. They were outnumbered 1,000,000-1, facing certain death, and they were not backing down. "Why do they do this?" one of his advisors asked. "Why do they risk themselves for us? We barely know each other. Our species have no alliance, no treaty, no obligations. Why would they die for strangers?" Thessian didn't have an answer. The Tarathi were a logical people, and there was no logical reason for the humans to be here. By any reasonable calculation, they should have stayed far away from Viridian Prime. But they had come anyway. "Perhaps," Thessian said slowly. "That is what makes them special. They don't do what is logical. They do what is right." On the surface, Kyle was firing his weapon so fast that the barrel was starting to overheat. His ammunition counter was blinking red, warning him he was almost out. Around him, the other Marines were in the same situation. They had been fighting for so long, killed so many Krell, but the swarm kept coming. "I'm out," Nina shouted, dropping her empty rifle and pulling out her sidearm. The pistol had maybe 50 rounds. She would kill 50 more Krell, and then she would have nothing but a knife. "Hold the line," Kyle shouted back, though he knew it was futile. You couldn't hold a line when you had no ammunition. You couldn't fight when you had no weapons. But he would hold anyway, because that's what you did. You fought until you couldn't anymore. Then something changed. The Krell at the front of the swarm suddenly stopped moving forward. They stood still, their bodies twitching, their mandibles clicking rapidly. The whole swarm seemed to pause, as if the hive mind was confused. "What's happening?" Nina asked. Kyle didn't know. He checked his scanners, looking for any explanation. And then he saw it. Behind the Krell swarm, new contacts were appearing. Dozens of them, then hundreds, then thousands. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Kyle asked into his comm. "We see it," Jake replied, and there was excitement in his voice. "Kyle, that's the Galactic Council fleet. They finally decided to show up. The Council had sent an armada. Ships from a dozen different species dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately began attacking the Krell from behind. The swarm was now caught between two forces, the humans in front and the Council fleet behind. But Jake noticed something odd. The Council ships were hanging back, keeping their distance, using long-range weapons only. They weren't committing to a real fight. They were being cautious, protecting themselves. "Typical," Jake muttered. "They show up late and then let us do the hard work." A communication request came through from the Council flagship. Jake accepted it, and the image of Admiral Vorin appeared on screen. Vorin was a centauri, a species that looked vaguely reptilian with blue-green scales and large golden eyes. "Captain Morrison," Vorin said, his tone formal. "The Council appreciates your efforts here, but you should withdraw your forces now. This is clearly a Council matter, and we will handle it from here." Jake felt anger surge through him. "Handle it? You mean you're going to sit back and fire from a safe distance while my Marines are down there fighting hand-to-hand with those things? No. We started this fight, and we're going to finish it. Captain, your forces are exhausted and low on supplies. Be reasonable." "Reasonable went out the window when you left these people to die," Jake shot back. "We're not leaving until every last Krell is dead. You can help or you can watch, but you're not ordering me to do anything." Vorin looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Jake's expression must have convinced him it would be pointless. "Very well. The Council fleet will provide support, but this decision is on your head, Captain." "I can live with that," Jake replied and cut the connection. With the Council fleet attacking from behind, the Krell hive mind had to divide its attention. Portions of the swarm broke off to face this new threat, which relieved the pressure on Kyle's Marines. The humans used the breathing room to fall back to new positions, resupply their weapons, and prepare for the next wave. "How you holding up?" Kyle asked Nina as they loaded fresh ammunition into their rifles. "I'm tired, I'm sore, and I'm going to have nightmares about clicking sounds for the rest of my life," Nina replied. "But I'm still here. We all are." Kyle looked at his squad. They were battered, exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and determination. But they were still fighting, Still protecting those civilians. Still doing the job. You know what the funny thing is? Nina said quietly. The Council ships have better weapons than we do. Their shields are stronger. Their ships are faster. On paper, they're superior to us in every way. But, Kyle prompted, but they're afraid. They're holding back, trying to minimize their own risk. They're fighting like they don't want to be here. While we're down here, almost out of ammunition, facing impossible odds, and we're not backing down. What does that say about us? Kyle thought about that for a moment. It says we're either crazy or the bravest species in the galaxy. Maybe both. I think it says we care, Nina replied. We care enough to fight for people who aren't even our own species. We care enough to risk everything for strangers. That's not crazy. That's human, above. Part 5, 48 hours after the first human ship arrived at Viridian Prime, the battle was finally over. The last Krell had been hunted down and killed. Not a single living specimen remained on the planet or in orbit. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable, that had destroyed 17 civilizations, had been completely wiped out. Kyle sat on a piece of broken concrete, his helmet off, his face covered in sweat and grime. Around him, other Marines were doing the same, too exhausted to even celebrate their victory. They had fought for 2 days straight with only brief moments to rest and resupply. Several Marines hadn't made it, their bodies already being prepared for transport back to Earth. Final count is 47 dead, 132 wounded, Nina said quietly, sitting down next to Kyle. Considering what we faced, that's almost miraculous. It doesn't feel miraculous, Kyle replied, thinking about the faces of the men and women who wouldn't be going home. It feels like too many, I know. But Kyle, we saved 2 billion people. 2 billion. That has to count for something. Kyle looked out at the devastated city. The Tarathi were starting to emerge from their shelters now, cautiously at first, then in greater numbers as they realized the danger had passed. They looked at the human Marines with something like wonder, these warriors from a death world who had risked everything to save them. A group of Tarathi children approached, their crystalline bodies catching the sunlight. They were being herded by what looked like a teacher, an older Tarathi who seemed nervous but determined. The children stopped a few meters away, staring at the Marines with wide eyes. One small child, barely knee-high to Kyle, broke away from the group and walked right up to him. The child reached out a small crystalline hand and touched Kyle's armored leg. Are you the humans? The ones who killed the monsters? Kyle felt something break inside his chest. He carefully reached down and picked up the child, holding the small being gently in his massive armored hands. Yeah, kid. We're the humans. And the monsters are all gone now. You're safe. The child smiled, a gesture that looked strange on the crystalline face but was clearly meant to show happiness. Thank you for saving my family. Kyle had to blink several times to clear his vision. You're welcome, kid. That's what we do. The teacher came forward looking apologetic. I'm sorry, Sergeant. The children wanted to see their heroes. I hope we're not bothering you. Not at all, Kyle said, carefully setting the child down. Tell them they were very brave hiding in those shelters. They did great. As the Tarathi group moved on, Nina nudged Kyle with her elbow. So still think those 47 lives were wasted? No, Kyle admitted. Not wasted. Just wish we could have saved them too. Up in orbit, Jake was dealing with a different kind of challenge. Admiral Vorin had called for a formal meeting between the human fleet commanders and the council representatives. Jake knew this meeting was going to be difficult, but he went anyway. The meeting took place via holographic projection, with representatives from multiple species appearing as translucent images. Admiral Vorin stood at the center, looking uncomfortable. Next to him were representatives from the Centauri, the Velkai, the Asherin, and half a dozen other species. Captain Morrison, Vorin began formally. The Galactic Council wishes to acknowledge your role in the defense of Viridian Prime. Your actions, while somewhat irregular, did contribute to the defeat of the Krell swarm. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Somewhat irregular? We answered a distress call that you ignored. We fought and bled to save 2 billion people that you wrote off as acceptable losses. And now you want to downplay our contribution? A Velkai representative spoke up, her voice cold. Captain, you must understand the Council's position. The Viridian system is outside our protected zone. Committing forces there would have left other systems vulnerable. We have to think about the greater good. The greater good, Jake repeated slowly. Is that what you call leaving an entire planet to be consumed? Tell me, if it had been one of your worlds, would you still talk about the greater good? The representatives shifted uncomfortably. None of them answered the question. I thought so, Jake continued. Here's the truth. You didn't help because you were afraid. The Krell scared you, so you fell back on rules and regulations to justify doing nothing. Meanwhile, 5 human ships and 200 Marines did what your entire fleet couldn't or wouldn't do. Captain Morrison, your tone is inappropriate, Vorin said, trying to regain control of the meeting. My tone is honest, Jake shot back. And here's something else that's honest. Humanity has been petitioning for full council membership for 3 years now. Every time you've denied us, you say we're too aggressive, too violent, too unpredictable. You look at Earth and see a dangerous death world, and you look at us and see dangerous Deathworlders. That's not entirely unfair, another representative muttered. Maybe not, Jake agreed. We are from a death world. We are aggressive. We are capable of incredible violence. But you know what else we are? We're the ones who showed up when no one else would. We're the ones who fought impossible odds to save strangers. We're the ones who understand that sometimes the right thing to do is also the dangerous thing to do. Jake took a breath, calming himself. So here's what's going to happen. Humanity is withdrawing its petition for council membership. That caused a stir among the representatives. Several of them started talking at once, their voices overlapping in confusion. However, Jake continued, we're offering something different. Any species that wants human protection can request it directly. We'll establish defense agreements outside the council framework. We'll be the ones who answer the distress calls that the council decides are too risky or too expensive. We'll be the galaxy's emergency responders. That's unacceptable, Vorin said immediately. You can't just ignore the council's authority. Watch us, Jake replied calmly. You don't want us in your club? Fine, we'll make our own arrangements. And when the next crisis happens, when the next unstoppable threat appears, you can debate and form committees and worry about jurisdiction. We'll be too busy actually helping people. He ended the connection before they could respond, leaving the council representative staring at empty space where his hologram had been. Amy looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, did you just tell the Galactic Council to get lost? More or less, Jake admitted. Paul, prepare a message to be sent to all member species. Let them know that if they ever need help, they can call humanity directly. We'll come running, even if it means fighting impossible odds, Paul asked. Especially then, Jake replied. Down on the planet's surface, Governor Thessian was addressing his people for the first time since the invasion began. The broadcast was being sent across the entire planet, reaching every shelter, every survivor, every Tarathi who had lived through the nightmare. My fellow Tarathi, Thessian began, his voice stronger than it had been in days. We have survived. The Krell swarm came to consume our world, and we survived because of the humans. They came when no one else would. They fought when victory seemed impossible. And they saved us, he paused, looking directly into the camera. The humans lost 47 of their people defending our world. 47 warriors who died far from their home, fighting for a species they barely knew. We owe them a debt that can never be fully repaid. Thessian took a deep breath. But we can honor them. We can remember what they taught us. That strength is not measured only in weapons or technology, but in the willingness to stand up for what is right. That compassion and courage are not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths any species can possess. The humans call themselves Deathworlders. They come from a planet that tried to kill them every single day, and they survived by becoming strong, adaptable, and unstoppable. But they also became something else. They became protectors. They became the ones who answer the call when others won't. Starting today, we will rebuild our world, and when we do, we will build a monument in the capital city. It will bear the names of the 47 humans who died saving us, and it will bear a message for all future generations. The message will read, they came when no one else would. They fought when victory seemed impossible. They are the Deathworlders, and they are humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The broadcast ended, and across Viridian Prime, the Tarathi people wept. Not from sadness, but from gratitude and a new understanding of what it meant to be truly brave. A week later, the human fleet prepared to depart. The wounded had been treated, the dead had been honored, and the ships had been resupplied. The Tarathi had offered to host the humans for as long as they wanted, but Jake knew it was time to move on. There were other places that might need help, other people who might need protecting. Kyle stood on the surface one last time, looking at the city that was already starting to be rebuilt. The Tarathi were resilient people. With help from the Council and the humans, they would recover. It would take years, maybe decades, but they would rebuild. "Time to go, Sergeant," Nina said, walking up beside him. "I know," Kyle replied. "Just wanted to take one last look. Remember what we fought for. Think we'll be back? Maybe. If they need us, we'll come back. That's what we do." They boarded the transport that took them up to the Warhammer. As the ship left orbit, Kyle looked back at Viridian Prime, watching the planet. Part 6. 3 months after the Battle of Viridian Prime, the galaxy was a different place. The story of the human fleet that defeated the Krell swarm had spread to every corner of known space. Some species praised the humans as heroes. Others worried that beings capable of such violence might become a threat. But everyone agreed on one thing: humanity could not be ignored. Captain Jake Morrison stood on Earth at the human military headquarters, staring at a wall covered with messages. Each one was a request for help from a different species, a different world. Some were facing pirate attacks, others were dealing with natural disasters. A few were threatened by hostile neighbors. All of them wanted human assistance. "There are over 200 requests here," General Kate Harper said, walking up beside Jake. She was the head of Earth's military forces. A stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "We don't have the resources to answer all of them." "I know," Jake replied, studying the messages. "But we have to try. We told the galaxy we would answer when they called. We can't back out now. Captain, you and your crew need rest. You've been through hell. The Battle of Viridian Prime took everything out of you." Jake thought about the 47 names on the memorial, the faces of the people who hadn't come home. "That's exactly why we have to keep going, General. Those people died believing they were making a difference. If we stop now, if we turn our backs on others who need help, then what was it all for?" Harper sighed. "You're a stubborn man, Morrison. That's probably why you're good at what you do." She pointed to one of the messages. "This one is from the Drax Confederation. They're being raided by pirates from the Crimson Star Gang. The pirates have hit 6 colonies in the past month, stealing supplies and taking hostages." "What does the Council say about it?" "The Council says the Drax territories are too far from their patrol routes. They can spare a few ships, but not enough to make a real difference." Harper looked at Jake. "Sound familiar?" "Too familiar," Jake muttered. "The Council only protects what's convenient. Everyone else is on their own. Unless they call the humans," Harper said. "We've become the galaxy's backup plan. The ones people turn to when the official channels fail them." Jake looked at the wall of messages again. Each one represented people in trouble, civilians who just wanted to live their lives without fear. "Then that's what we'll be. Send a message to the Valkyrie. Tell my crew we're heading out again in 2 days. We're going to help the Drax." Word of humanity's new role spread quickly. Within weeks, human ships were scattered across multiple sectors, responding to emergencies that the Council had deemed too minor or too distant to handle. Some missions were simple, like escorting trade convoys through dangerous space. Others were complex, requiring careful negotiation and tactical planning. The Warhammer, under Captain Lisa Grant, broke up a slave trading operation in the Outer Rim. The Iron Maiden rescued a research station that had been hit by a meteor strike. The Liberty stopped a war between 2 minor species by mediating a peace agreement. And the Ragnarok hunted down a group of mercenaries who had been terrorizing frontier settlements, but it was the Valkyrie's mission to help the Drax that showed the galaxy just how effective human intervention could be. The Drax were an interesting species. They looked like large bipedal bears, covered in thick fur that ranged from brown to black. They were strong and tough, but not particularly aggressive. They made their living through mining operations on resource-rich planets in their confederation. Jake met with the Drax leadership on their capital world. The head of their government was a massive Drax named Korak, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and had scars across his muzzle from years of working in the mines before entering politics. "Captain Morrison," Korak said in a deep, rumbling voice, "thank you for coming. The Crimson Star pirates have been bleeding us dry. Every month they hit another colony, take what they want, and disappear before our defense forces can respond." "Tell me about these pirates," Jake said. "How many ships? What kind of weapons?" "They have a fleet of about 20 ships, all heavily armed. Their leader is a Krath named Zex. The Krath are predators, natural hunters. Zex uses his instincts to plan ambushes and surprise attacks." Korak's face showed frustration. We've tried to fight them, but we're miners, not warriors. We don't know how to hunt hunters. Jake smiled grimly. Lucky for you, humans are pretty good hunters ourselves. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Over the next few days, Jake studied everything the Drax had about the Crimson Star pirates. He analyzed their attack patterns, their choice of targets, their escape routes, and he started to see a pattern. They're not random, Jake explained to his crew on the Valkyrie's bridge. Zex chooses targets based on 3 factors: valuable cargo, weak defenses, and easy escape routes. He hits, grabs what he can carry, and runs before reinforcements arrive. So how do we catch him? Amy asked. We bait a trap, Jake replied. We set up a target that looks perfect. Valuable cargo, minimal defenses, isolated location. When Zex takes the bait, we spring the trap. Paul frowned. But if the defenses look too weak, he'll get suspicious. Zex has survived this long by being smart. That's why we're going to use real bait, Jake said. We're going to load a Drax transport with actual valuable cargo. We're going to give it minimal security. The only difference is that we'll be waiting nearby, ready to jump in the moment they attack. The plan took 2 weeks to set up. The Drax loaded one of their transports with rare minerals worth millions of credits. They gave it only a small escort of 2 light patrol ships. To anyone watching, it looked like an easy target. The transport set out on a route that would take it through an isolated sector, far from any military bases or support. Jake positioned the Valkyrie just outside sensor range, cloaked and waiting. How long do you think before they bite? Amy asked. Zex hits about once a week, Jake replied, and this target is too good to pass up. My guess is within 3 days. It took 2. The Crimson Star fleet appeared suddenly, dropping out of faster-than-light travel right in front of the Drax transport. 20 pirate ships against 1 transport and 2 escorts. The outcome should have been obvious. The Drax escorts immediately called for help, just like they were supposed to. The transport tried to run, its engines straining. The pirates gave chase, firing warning shots, demanding the transport surrender its cargo. Zex's voice came over the open channels, cocky and confident. This is Crimson Star. Surrender your cargo and you'll live. Resist and we'll take it from your wreckage. Your choice. Now, Jake said quietly. The Valkyrie dropped its cloak and jumped into normal space right between the pirates and their prey. The sudden appearance of a human warship caught the pirates completely off guard. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Valkyrie. Jake's voice boomed over the comm. You are under arrest for piracy, theft, and kidnapping. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. There was a moment of shocked silence. Then Zex's voice came back, angry now. Humans? What are humans doing in Drax space? This is none of your concern. Leave now and we'll forget you were here. That's not how this works, Jake replied. I'm giving you one chance. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you refuse or try to run, I will open fire. Zex laughed, a harsh sound. You're 1 ship. We're 20. Do the math, human. I did, Jake said. The math says you're going to lose. Last chance, instead of surrendering, the pirates opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the Valkyrie from multiple directions. It was a heavy barrage that would have destroyed most ships. But the Valkyrie was designed by humans who expected to fight against superior numbers. Its shields held easily against the initial attack. And then it was the Valkyrie's turn. The human ship's weapons were devastatingly effective. Railgun fire tore through pirate ships like they were made of cardboard. Guided missiles found their targets with perfect accuracy. Within minutes, half the pirate fleet was disabled or destroyed. All ships scatter, Zex ordered, his earlier confidence gone. The remaining pirate vessels tried to break away, each one heading in a different direction. Amy, target their engines, Jake ordered. I want prisoners, not corpses. The Valkyrie's weapons shifted focus, precisely targeting the engine sections of the fleeing ships. One by one, the pirate vessels lost power and drifted helpless in space. Only Zex's command ship managed to jump to faster-than-light speed, escaping the trap. Should we pursue? Paul asked. Jake shook his head. No, we got most of them and we sent a message. Besides, I want Zex to run home and tell everyone what happened. Let all the pirates in this sector know that the Drax are under human protection now. The captured pirates were turned over to Drax authorities. The stolen cargo from previous raids was recovered and returned, and the Crimson Star Gang, once one of the most feared pirate groups in the sector, was broken. Korak invited Jake to a celebration in the capital city. The Drax threw massive parties with loud music, huge amounts of food, and wrestling competitions that got pretty intense. Jake and his crew were treated like heroes. You've given us back our security, Korak said, raising a massive mug of Drax ale. For months we lived in fear. Now we can work our minds, raise our families, and live our lives without looking over our shoulders. How can we possibly thank you? Jake smiled.